Hi and welcome to My Art Pixie. Today I'm going to do a book review over a book that I've had for a little while and I would like to share with you today. So this is Creating Textures and Pen and Ink with Watercolor by Claudia Nice. We'll kind of go step by step through it so that you can see, and then I'll do a little bit of pen and ink and watercolor myself so that you can see how the book can benefit you in your pen and ink and watercolor techniques. Excuse the glare with my lighting, but I just want to make sure that you can see the pages, but the front cover does have a shine to it. But you can see here that the back gives some examples of things, but it also tells you a little bit about the author and about the different techniques and things that she goes through throughout the book. So let's go ahead and take a peek inside so that you can see. She has a lot of work throughout, which is really nice, using the pen and ink and watercolor technique. And she goes over quite a bit inside. So you can see here, she goes over the materials that you're going to need, basic textures, the look of transparency, metallic impressions, earth textures, sky and weather, wood grain patterns, tree techniques, which I thought was an interesting addition because it would be nice to get those tree textures and all the detail that you can get with the bark and all of those kinds of things. And then translucent florals, still life strategies, and fur to feathers, which of course is going to cover animal hair and that kind of thing. So moving along, she does have an introduction and then again some more of her work. And she goes over the materials. So there's lots of different ways that you can apply your pen and ink. What I tend to use are the micron pens, and I put a few out here so that you can see. Oh, whoops, it's backwards. So I use the Pigma micron pens, and they come in different sizes, and I use those a lot in my watercolor journals and other works, but she does go through each of the different pens that you can use. You can also use ink as long as it's waterproof. You can use pens that you can fill with ink as well. This is a shark pen. I'll link it below if you're interested, but you do have to fill this with ink. So technical pens and things like that. She goes over the different inks that you would need to buy, and she explains that Indian inks are composed of water, carbon black particles of rich dark color, and then latex for a binder, and so therefore it's permanent. And so that's what you want, is a permanent ink. These micron pens, for example, are permanent. So once you apply, there's no turning back. You know, kind of adds to the challenge, but that's what you're looking for when it comes to the inks. You can get colored inks as well, and then she just goes over the color wheel, of course. If you're not familiar, I have done some videos about that, but knowing your color wheel is super important, color theory and things like that. Liquid acrylics, so I have some of those as well that you can definitely use in this process. Completely doable if you have those on hand. And then of course watercolor paper and the different brushes that you will need. You will need watercolor brushes. Watercolor brushes, of course, work best with watercolor. And this is a dagger here. You can see that because it has that curved end there. But you can also use traveling watercolor brushes as well. And then she has in here this old worn synthetic flat brush, which would probably, because this is entitled like you can get, you know, good texture, that makes sense. So this isn't necessarily going to be you know, a good quality brush. It's going to be one of those brushes that you tend to avoid because it has a lot of mark making, but that's what you want when you have texture. So she does include that in here, which I thought was really cool. So this is called a stylus, and I've had this since college. I used it in different art classes that I had, but in watercolor we used it to put impressions onto the paper. It has kind of it comes to a point, but then there's a little round ball at the end. And then same with this side, but it's a little more like a fine point. So I would say a medium and a fine, but you can create impressions on your watercolor paper. So basically draw on the paper and then you can put your watercolor over it, and you can see because it has pressed that paper, you can see those grooves. And so she's included that. And then she also has the sea sponge brushes, which give you great texture as well. So she does include a lot of things, not just the watercolor brushes, but other tools that you may use getting those textures and things with your pen and ink. So then she just kind of goes into the basic textures. I've seen a lot of pen and ink books cover this same thing. It's not necessarily anything new. It's almost like, well, anybody who works with pen and ink is going to work with cross-hatching, contour lines, parallel lines, stippling, wavy lines, and cross-hatching, and all those things. Those are just the common mark makings of pen and ink, but they do give you great texture. So she goes over all of them in great detail, and then she also includes watercolor textures. So she's got the pen and ink, and then also the what you can do with the watercolor and how you can get different variations and things with that and different values. And she just does a great job of going into detail. So here she goes over the dry surface techniques, the damp surface techniques, wet on wet, blotting, impressions, which again you would use one of these, or there's other ways that you can make impressions, like with saran wrap, for example. And then salt and alcohol inks, and then of course the sponges and the splatter technique. So she really does a good job of like covering all of the watercolor techniques that you could use, but also incorporates the pen and ink at the same time. So she just does a fabulous job, in my opinion, of explaining all of those different things. She talks about transparencies, and she's got lots of visuals too, which are really great. Here she covers like eyelashes and, you know, the different textures of the animal eyes. So she does a fantastic job covering that. And then metallic. So a lot of times it's harder to get that sheen or that shine with your watercolor, but she shows you here how with the help of pen and ink you can get that. And I want to show you I have done this very same thing with the key. This is not watercolor, but this is my brown paper sketchbook, and I love drawing in here with pen and ink. But what I want to show you, that's so cool. What I want to show you are those keys. Here's the keys. So here are some keys that I've done with pen and ink, and just by using the different mark making, you can really get an interesting texture with the pen and ink. Here you can see I have made little hatch marks going kind of at a diagonal to make it look like that is a thick piece of like a lock that has like a thick edge. Here's some other keys that I have done. And the other thing I wanted to show you were some of these like old time telephones that kind of remind me of the same kind of antique-y, metallic kind of feeling. But again, just using those pen and ink techniques and bringing up the texture in the different pieces. The little lines to make the mark making. It's a lot of fun in my opinion. I absolutely love that you can do that with pen and ink. But you can do it with your pen and ink in your watercolor journal, and then of course adding the watercolor over the top. And so she does a great job of going into like what specific colors will give you that look, which I really like. Like, look at that. It looks like the gold is shining on that cast iron metal. So just super cool. And then she goes over like stone and granite, marble, all of those different kinds of just natural textures that you would find here and there in the world. And then she goes over skies. So skies can definitely be, like a smooth surface, but you can add a lot of the stippling effects with the pen and ink to get different shades and shadows. Get the rain coming down, which is really nice. So it's really using that pen to heighten the watercolor. So the watercolor could probably stand alone. Like, you could probably have this picture and not have any pen and ink. But just by adding those little stippling dots, it creates this gray pen work throughout, and just adds more interest to the painting overall with that extra stippling involved. Wood grain pattern. So that's when look at this. She goes over like every single wood grain. So cool. So if you're interested in like stone, wood grain, rustic kinds of things, which I love. If you've been following me, I love to paint barns and, things out on the farm and stuff like that, but also driftwood from the ocean, just all of those things. And then trees. So there's all kinds of different trees. Of course, we know that, right? But just going over the different, they're going to look different depending on what tree it is, which seems obvious, but like just to break it down like this is really clever. So yeah, and leaves, foliage, and then the florals. Which again, I just absolutely love. So, mushrooms, oh my gosh, aren't they cute? And this page, oh my word, the mushrooms. Again, if you've been following me, I also like mushrooms. And then she goes into still lifes, which could be anything, from food to bottles that you have around your house. But just looking at those items and just really getting the details down with the pen and ink, and then also just doing the nice wash with the watercolor and just bringing out that shine, bringing out the shine in the apple, and the different textures that we would naturally see in the real world. And so they look realistic because they have the pen and ink and the watercolor combined. The onion, look at that detail, so cool. And then the texture on the seashells. So there's just a benefit of involving the pen to get those extra fine details. And then here she has some textiles. So just everything from the jeans to corduroy even, and lace. So pretty. And then she goes into, of course, animals and the animal hair. So if any of these topics really resonate with you, I would definitely encourage you to pick this up and kind of work your way through it as you learn the technique of pen and ink and watercolor, because it's really going to benefit you when it comes to getting those realistic textures and things like that. If you are really into wanting your pieces to look more realistic, I would highly recommend that you pick up Claudia Nice, that you would pick up Claudia's book, and I will link it below. It is through my Amazon affiliate link, and I do get a little percentage of that. So if you do use that link, thank you so much, because you're just helping me to be able to continue to do these videos for you. So thank you so much. So let's try a couple. I think I'd really like to try one of these wood grains. So I have my watercolor kit here, a little towel. I used to use paper towel a lot, and I've switched to using cloth all the time now. That I can just pop in the washing machine. I have a little bit of water, got my sponge, and my other tools. So I'm going to pick up this watercolor journal up to a brand new page, and let's try some of this wood texture. I think I'm going to pick out a couple here. I really like this one too. So this has like it says smooth wood, and then this one is a watercolor splatter. So let's try those two, and get my watercolor in here. So you can do pen and ink two different ways. You can get a pencil and you can sketch out what you want to do, and then you can apply your ink to it. And then you can go in with your watercolor and you can fill it in. Or you can go in with your watercolor and you can take your pen and ink and go over the top of it. It's kind of like a reverse pen and ink. If you're familiar with how that works, I do have a video about that. I'll link it for you guys to see. So I'm going to, I got too much red. I'm going to work on this one first, and just apply some of that water. And this doesn't have to be perfect, because really I'm just trying to get that color down in kind of like a rectangle block. But I'm still trying to keep, there's like a little bit of a sheen on this side. And there's a little bit of red, so I want to get that in there. Okay. So now I have that, and I have that little bit of shine right here. And I think I'm going to run that down a little bit more. I'll pick up some of that excess water at the bottom. And I'm going to let that dry. And you can really see the texture of this paper, which is totally fine, but you can already see some of that texture. And then this is the other one that I want to do, and it has a little bit of a lighter feel to it. I'm going to try to add a little bit of the white there, and we will add it over here. So I'm going to go ahead and make my rectangle. Kind of has like a blonde, more of a blonde color, I guess you could say. And it doesn't really have a shine to it or a sheen to it. Let's see if I can get it more solid. Of course, it depends on the brush that you use too. So now I have those two kind of laid out. I'm going to grab my hair dryer so I can make the process go a little faster. So I have different size micron pens that I brought over to my table. I actually just keep them in a little cubby over here to the right of me. But they come in different sizes. So, oh, I guess I grabbed two number 2s unintentionally, but you can see here that I've got a 005, a 03, and a 02. Put them in order. Of course, it would be like that, from the smallest to the largest in this particular 3 that I have here. With these textures, they're so fine and so thin that I'm going to actually start with the 005 and go with the smallest one. These are really defined strokes that are moving down, and these are more like, and these strokes aren't as defined, but it's still creating those lines or grains within the wood. So let's give it a shot. I'm going to start with this first one, and I'm going to start over here to this side. Now they have theirs where it's kind of, you know, going off of the color, which we can do the same thing. Okay, so there's that one. Super cool. So what this one has is then some watercolor splatters over the top. So I'm going to zoom back out, and I'm going to add those watercolor splatters. So basically what you do with that is you get your brush and you're going to fill it. It's a kind of a brown. I'm going to mix it with the yellow ochre as well. But get a little bit of that brown. And make sure that I have enough, like you want, kind of make a pool there and add that color, that darker color. And then you are going to flick it down. Now, if I flick it right now, it's going to go all over the book. So, what I have are these, oh shoot, what are they called? These are paper palettes that you can buy, and I use them for this purpose. I mean, I use them as palettes too, but so whenever I'm flicking any paint, then I'm able to protect, you know, whatever surface that I'm working on. So if you have it on hand, great, but you definitely, I don't want to get it all over my book. Let me move this over so you can see. And then I'm just going to flick it like this. Okay, and it's going to give you that texture. So I've got this wood piece and this wood piece. Okay, and I will remove this paper so that we can compare it to the one in the book. And remember, it doesn't have to be identical to the book. Really, you're just practicing. So you just are going to do as close as you can. Like, I could probably go back in with some red with that one. I actually think I will do that. Let me get that brown off and get some of that red. And so just go in and kind of add that red. Throughout there. Oh yeah, that looks nice. Maybe got a little bit too much. Yeah, so wherever that that ink, those ink marks are, there's a little bit of that rusty orangish red. And this is called Desert Ash Wood, if you were wondering what it was called. Let's add that red in there. Yeah, nice. Okay, so now that I've gone in and added that, now you can see it's getting there. With a little bit of practice, I might have it down. And then over here, I have these two. So you can see I've added some of that sheen in. I think I could use a little bit more orange, which would probably be a little bit of that yellow ochre and yellow. Okay, so again, not perfect, but definitely fun to practice. So what I tend to do then from this point is I will label everything in my sketchbook. So that then you have it as a reference. And if I wanted to practice a second piece, I could practice a second piece over here. I could also write down the colors that I used as well. I used the cadmium yellow and the white to create this blonde color, and then I went back in to add kind of those rusty orange pieces. So you could write down all of the colors that you used, and you could even reference the colors that you used by making little blocks. So you can see the benefit of, you know, practicing this, so that when I go to a larger piece and I want to have a larger, you know, tree trunk or rustic piece of wood or something like that, I can add these to my my paintings and my pen and ink and watercolor paintings. So I can practice in my sketchbook, and then I can actually go and apply it to a larger piece that I'm working on. So, and that was just one book or one page, two-page spread in this book. Thanks for joining me, and let me know in the comments below if this was helpful to you at all, or if you decide that you're going to give it a try and try out some of these wood grain effects with your pen and ink and watercolor as well. And I will see you later, and until next time, bye!